Hey everybody, it's Chuck Johnson, editor-in-chief of GotNews.com, the most hated man on the internet. Actually, am I still the most hated man on the internet, even though I've been kicked off of Twitter? Is Martin Shkreli just dethroned me? Do I have to commit a federal crime to do it? I don't know. Don't know. But anyways, here I am, and I just watched the trailer for the new Star Wars, Star Wars Rogue One. Kind of a strange name, Rogue One. But nonetheless, there you have it. Rogue One is going to show up at a theater near you, the new J.J. Abrams movie. I'm going to say I did not see the latest incarnation of Star Wars on principle. My view increasingly is that Hollywood and J.J. Abrams in particular is about trying to take these icons, trying to take these things of people's childhood and make them into something they're not. And so I won't participate in that. I wrote a piece a while back about how Star Wars is anti-white. Went into like ways in which Hollywood has taken what was an American idea, what was a sort of like Western in space, and now has decided that they're going to put a whole bunch of British actors and black actors and a bunch of people who are not American in key roles, and they're going to expect that this is going to work out. And normally, I wouldn't care. Like, who cares? Like, it's Star Wars, man. Like, it's a fantasy. Like, grow up, right? Fair enough. Okay, cool. But the thing is that I was reading recently about the PayPal mafia. I don't know if you've heard of these guys, like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Max Levchin. There are a bunch of these guys who went and they created some of the most powerful companies of our era, basically undergirding the entire internet. It's amazing, like the range these folks have had. Almost all male, almost all white, or I guess Asian, Asian, Indian, Jewish, that kind of thing. High IQ on the bell curve guys, and they created they basically created the modern internet as we know it and understand it. And they were obsessed with Star Wars. They thought of themselves as rebels. They thought of themselves as wild men. They thought of themselves as visionaries. They read Snow Crash. They debated some of the top subjects in the science. They thought very seriously about Star Wars. And of course, there have been other people, NASA engineers and others who have been heavily influenced by Star Trek, both of which were highly influential in my childhood. I remember playing Rogue Squadron and Shadows of the Empire and a number of video games Star Wars themed. And what I learned from Star Wars is this idea of like the knight errant, this idea of protecting the weak, all those things that the Jedi are supposedly stand for, rebelling against authority. I think George Lucas later said at one point that the Rebel Alliance was a metaphor for the Vietnamese communist insurgency. Maybe so, but I didn't take it that way as a kid. This idea of like fight the power, fight the man. These were very influential ideas to me when I was a kid, as they were for lots of other young, predominantly white men. And I remember having discussions and arguments with other young kids about who was better, Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. Who was more badass, who was the man. Of course, Han Solo won those arguments because Luke Skywalker was kind of a pussy. But nonetheless, those were the fights that we had. Those were the arguments that we discussed, internally. And so, but there's nothing for us in these new movies. All the white guys are the villains. And Kylo Ren is sort of like a millennial Darth Vader. My understanding of it, again, I haven't seen the movies, so I refuse to see them. But basically, we're creating a culture right now where there's nothing for our productive classes, most of whom are white nerds, to feel as if they're a part of it. Now, people may like the fact that there's some live, 20-something, British actress. I mean, I admit that both of the actresses are nice to look at, but there's not really anything that you're invested in the story. It's becoming a problem where the white guys are always the villains. And this is something that we're seeing over and over and over and over again. And it's also becoming a problem because our culture is degenerating. It's reaching a point where we're doing remake after remake after remake after remake after remake. just so that people in Hollywood can nail their leftovers, or at least try and get some money in the international box office. Now we know that the social justice idea doesn't really work. This idea that like there needs to be a black cast member, a gay cast member. I mean, J.J. Abrams himself said that that there are going to be gay characters. J.J. Abrams, the director of Star Wars, said there are going to be gay characters in Star Wars. Like, why? To what end? Like, what's the point? And so, well, the point is obviously to make people like me, white America, white Protestant, America, although I'm Catholic by conversion, try to make us uncomfortable and uneasy. And it's about this kind of like culturally Marxist project of trying to reduce all of the things and respin, reform, redefine things that were very influential in people's childhoods. Now, if you tell me who gets to be the villain and who gets to be the hero in drama, I will tell you who rules you. I will tell you who's in control. And so, what I think it's worth thinking about as we kind of think through the Star Wars films, think through kind of where our culture is going, all of the remakes that have been done. Fantastic Four just turned one of their characters, who's supposedly the brother of Sue Storm, just turned him into a black guy because why not? And of course the movie failed, and that's the other thing people aren't starting to get. Like a lot of the social justice projects, the more they signal towards it, the more it ultimately ends up failing. A lot of the sort of blaxploitation films or social justice films that have been done in recent years, they flop, internationally. They just don't do well. The only movies that seem to do well are superhero movies, and those superhero movies are almost always changed in whatever the politically correct version is. So we had James Bond talk about being gay. Now there's this whole push to make him black. It talked about being gay. I think it was not in the last one, but the one before that, the one with Javier Bardem. And so here we are, taking these iconic symbols of strong white male influence, alpha males, and we're turning them into weak characters, if they're there at all, or they're just being removed entirely. And we think that this will be good for civilization, which seems to me to be a really, really bad idea. If it's true that the role model theory is true for blacks, the idea that you need to have, a diverse group of people so that blacks, diverse selection of people in the professional classes so that blacks have something to look up for. Is that not true with white kids? That they might have something to look up to too, or do we not care because they have white privilege? Not really sure, but I do want a society that has more geniuses. I don't really care if they're Asian, Jewish, whatever. I just want a society that has more cool stuff and that actually gets us to Mars, that actually goes and builds real amazing civilizations. And it seems to me that if you can take space, which is this unlimited frontier, this very American concept of going out there into the wilds of space and all the crazy shenanigans that take place and danger and mock danger. If you can take that and you can just say that, whites aren't allowed, don't worry about it, I think that's pretty dangerous for the future of the world. It kind of reminds me, there was a kind of a racist joke that a friend of mine used to say, and it was about Gene Roddenberry, and Gene Roddenberry was meeting with the Prince of Saudi Arabia, as this joke goes, and Prince of Saudi Arabia came to Gene Roddenberry, and he said, so Gene, I love Star Trek. It's awesome. It's so cool. I dig it. It's cool. But let me ask you something, Gene. Why is it that there are no Arabs in Star Trek? And Roddenberry turns to him and he says, "Because it's in the future, dumbass." The joke being that post 9/11, not to explain a joke and be that guy, but the joke being post 9/11, Arabs were not going to be a part of the future. At least this is when the joke got a lot of mileage, and a friend keeps telling it to me years after the fact. It's kind of lost its humor. But in any event, the point is that he who controls who's in space, who's out there, they control the future. And similarly, like I recently read this book, The Martian. I don't know if you've heard about it. It was turned into a movie. Saw the movie too with my wife, and again, they take characters that were Koreans, that were Indians, that were basically the kind of people that you would expect to be at NASA, and they turn them and Jews, and they turn them into blacks and Hispanics, um, even though there's not a lot of blacks and Hispanics in NASA, and so they create this kind of like fake version of NASA, and they remove they remove the Asian minorities that are there, um, and this happens time and time again. Basically, that there's this whitewashing or cultural change, and it's really all about making blacks and Hispanics feel comfortable, and about turning white people into the villain. And so this is why I don't participate. And if you see the most recent movie, the most recent trailer of Rogue One, you've got this woman who's rebelling. I rebel is the tagline of this thing. Well, think about your own life. Like, how often is it that women that you're around rebel? How many women leaders of rebellions do you know? Historically, not that many. Joan of Arc, maybe. Yeah, I'll grant that. But not many. And so, the reason for it is that, probably in our evolutionary development, throughout our history, alpha males would team up with betas and others to try to overthrow other alphas. And so it's often people who are in the middle classes that were leading revolutions, not people in the extreme poverty or wealthy enough. It's always people who are sort of class traders that lead rebellions. See this in the form of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, obviously is a class trader. To a certain extent, Donald Trump is a class trader, right? He's to the manner born, and yet speaks as if he's from Brooklyn or the Bronx. And what I find so interesting about this idea of women rebelling is that why? I mean, why would a woman want to rebel? We know throughout human history that women have tended to conform to behavior, that they tend to be the ones that are more in favor of the status quo. They tend to be the ones more in favor of the state. Not all women, but this is certainly reflected in poll after poll and society after society, and how women tend to be more and more welcoming of things like refugees, things like the other. They tend to be much, much more welcoming of state intervention in people's economic affairs. And so this idea that there's like a woman running around in Star Wars, killing people and whatever, to me that's the real fantasy. And the fact that she's only like, 110, 120 pounds, and she's supposedly like super powerful. Like, give me a break. At a certain point, even Star Wars strains credulity. So I don't know what you guys think about this. Email me, editor@gotnews.com. I'll be doing sort of more of these cultural podcast riffs things. And I love Star Wars. IG-88 was one of my favorite bounty hunters. It was kind of cool, like Robot back in the day. I remember killing him in Rogue Squadron, how fun that was. And obviously fighting Boba Fett and all the rest of it. So I think my nerd creds on this are pretty solid, pretty strong. But nonetheless, I think we've got a serious problem here of turning white kids, against themselves. And I'll be putting up the link I wrote earlier about Star Wars is anti-white, or at least increasingly the J.J. Abrams view. And so I'll be putting that up soon, and look forward to hearing from you soon.